speaking in good faith with Imam Azhar Subedar from his home in Frisco, Texas. And thank you, Imam, so much for making time today.
You're welcome. Good afternoon to all of you and to your listeners.
Just as a quick introduction, the Imam is a religious scholar with a master's in Islamic sciences and Arabic literature, with a vision to address the contemporary needs of the Muslim community by bringing relevancy to the holy text and still confront the social issues of today's world from a moral perspective. He has served as imam in various Muslim communities across the U.S., in Florida, and beyond, and been a religious advisor to the Florida Department of Education for over a decade. And interestingly, we'll ask about this, was a member of the White House faith-based and community initiatives under President Bush. And I'm just thrilled that you would speak with us today.
Thank
Tell
you.
me a little bit about the home you grew up in. Was that a religious environment? Was this always part of your life?
Actually, no. I come from a very diverse background. My parents are from two different continents. My mom from Africa, my dad from India. They met up and married in England, and thereafter migrated to Canada, where I was born much later. My brother and I are two in the family. We have no other siblings. We grew up in the society, trying to become a part of the society in which we also then compromise certain things for ourselves. Like our parents believed that we shouldn't speak our mother tongue or father tongue, but
Wow.
strictly focus on English and French, which was the language of the country. And so when it comes to observances, there were the seasonal observances and sometimes the daily observances, but the emphasis was not placed on it. So in short, we did not grow up in a religious home and a religious environment as one would anticipate it to be.
So, at what point did you begin to really personally connect with faith and the Quran?
So my grandmother used to visit her sons in Canada, and my father, when she would come by to my father and stay with us, there was a common theme of her emphasizing that we take religion on a bit more seriously than what we were currently doing. And in lieu of that, she also stressed to my father that my brother or I should take up the religion as a full commitment by memorizing the Quran and
Hmm.
living out a religious lifestyle and propagating that to others in the faith. And it was something that, my father didn't take seriously. And once we heard about it, we didn't take seriously either. However, my father's childhood friend who lived on the other side of the city, his son went off to England to memorize the Quran. And my brother, being closely the same age as him, felt the need to go off. And then, the domino effect, I also went to, and so it just started from there. Yeah.
And once you've memorized that and can recite that, is it Hafiz? Is that the word for someone who's done that?
Yes, a Hafiz is someone who has memorized and grasped the entire Quran, and the term Hafiz is more like a protector of the Quran, someone who is safekeeping it and safeguarding it
In your mind, in your heart.
in your mind and in your heart. Yes.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful. Well, the word Islam, I've understood, means submission. And we live in a time where, or maybe we live in a culture here
Mhm.
in the US where it's very individualistic. We don't love to be told what to do.
Mhm.
Talk to me about how you think about learning submission to God and why that's good and what the benefits are.
I think it's a very misconstrued understanding of submission in our world, in our society today. Let's talk about
Hmm.
society because we live in a country where freedom is amplified, where you have freedom to say what you want to say and preach, and you have the freedom to be who you want to be. And that's, again, no objection or against that. However, what we fail to realize is under the premise of freedom, we all are still submitting to something, if not surrendering to something. So, in order to expand on that, let me come back to Islam. So, Islam is submission and not surrendering. The difference is in surrendering, you have no choice. Your options are limited, if not none, and you just accept the status quo. It's like a boxer being boxed into the corner of the ring. They have no choice either to just call it quits or
Uh-huh.
keep on taking the beats. Whereas in submission is where your intellectual faculties and everything else voluntarily submit to the Lord, knowing that the Lord knows better than I do for myself. And he knows what's best for me, when it comes to my individual life, my family life, my work ethics, my prayer and obligations. He knows better than I. And so in a world, in a society where freedom is constantly discussed and used as a means of displaying to the rest of the world that, hey, we can be who we want and do what we want, in the back of that, what we forget is we're still surrendering, if not submitting to something. Many surrender or submit to their carnal desires or to following a certain path or way. If you're committed to a certain player or team, you submit your life, your time, your finances to that team. People who love sports just submitted to the Olympics. They went, they traveled, they spent time, money, and their life on the Olympics. So in the premise of freedom is also a level of surrendering or submitting based on how people see it.
You're actually making me think of Bob Dylan lyrics about you've got to serve somebody. Like you
It
will
is.
end up serving either a thing or God or whatever it might be. That's
Mhm.
really
Or
I love how
yourself.
you put that. Oh, well, unfortunately that could be true too.
Yeah. And the Quran kind of highlights that to us, and that's what we learn from our religion, from an overarching message. When you look at it, you're submitting to something, and Allah tells us in the Quran, "Have you seen the person who made their God their desires?" And so freedom is a term, it's an expression, but I think there could be much discussion on what freedom truly entails and what that really looks like.
Yeah. And that we live with the consequences of what we do choose. So
True.
I was intrigued on your website that it said, what if you could experience Islam or experience the Quran?
Mhm.
Which to me seemed to be saying not just knowing about your faith, but actually experience it. And is that something that happened to you on the way to becoming a spiritual teacher and leader, that you had a religious experience that makes you who you are?
Well, life is a journey, and each of us have our unique journey. I didn't. Um, it wasn't like I was enthusiastic about getting out there and learning the religion, and it was something I felt that my brother's doing, and I look up to my brother, so why not do the same? And he's looking up to his best friend, why not do the same? And of course, there were struggles along the path of acquiring knowledge and understanding who the Lord is, and the internal battles between getting what you want and what you expect. And so there were times of strenuous internal wars in myself,
Yeah.
that
Mm.
is this the right thing or not? Am I supposed to stick with this, or am I supposed to rebel? So my soul, mind, and body has gone through its phases of questioning and doubting, and um, fighting off what I would perceive to be right or wrong. And but my journey of life is interesting because, in short, 2000 November I graduated. 2001 I was traveling. 9/11 happened, and just before I can get into the field that I studied so long to acquire the knowledge thereof, my entire field changed. Not only
Ah,
did it's the perception of what an imam meant went down into the gutters, but then where Islam stood, Islam went into the gutters. And to make it worse, in the Muslim community, the job and the responsibilities of an imam shifted greatly. People talk about moving the goalpost per se. The entire field changed, not just the goalpost. And so it was really difficult trying to acknowledge and accept and embrace the reality. And I was in a position where, do I go forward and make this a career? Do I step back and reassess and go back to school and become something else? Or do I just take a job at a factory or somewhere and just live life out? Because it was a tough time. And there are so many incidents that had occurred thereafter. When I made the decision, no, I'm going to go forward with this, I ended up moving to Florida, where I was the first imam, a scholar imam from Miami to Tampa on the west coast of Florida. So serving in the community of Fort Myers and Punta Gorda and Port Charlotte as an imam, but also having an influence on Sarasota and Bradenton, Naples and Bonita, and this entire region helped me understand the importance of submitting to God and having God give you the opportunities to display that submission to Him. And that's where I started learning that Islam wasn't just words. It wasn't speaking points to either justify something or put someone down. Rather, it's a relationship with God. And irrespective of your time, place, or circumstances, that relationship is essential. It's integral to your existence, and it's meaningful for you. And that's where I started seeing the teaching and the path of Islam from a different lens. And I ended up creating this app called Quran Trek, where I try to help others become a living example of the Quran and not just reading and memorizing the Quran. And by doing so, you commit to your Lord and establish a relationship with Him, which you wish you would have done sooner. It's like, if I'm going to go meet Messi, I'm not going to go in these clothing. I'd rather wear a jersey, and I would kind of show him my loyalty per se, right?
Right,
So it's
right.
not about just doing Islam, it's about being a Muslim. It's a whole different level.
Boy, what a difficult time right around 9/11 to be on that journey you just described. I mean, boy, that a real journey.
Hmm.
In the little I have read of the Quran, I'm making my way through, but I
Hmm.
see over and over uh, God the merciful, Allah the merciful. Have you felt those mercies on that difficult path?
Once you search for it, it's easy to speak it. Like every time we read the Quran or we do anything, we say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful.
Mm,
It's something that we're taught to repeat only so that we can internalize the feelings of how our Lord is gracious and merciful. But it's actually tested when you need it most, and in times of darkness, in times of
mm,
unease, when you're able to reach out and grasp for, ar-Rahman and ar-Rahim, gracious and the most merciful, is where you start to realize how His mercy is actually playing out. And at that time, you don't see, well, with evolving in that mindset, you no longer see your problems and predicaments as problems, but you see them as doors and opportunities to get somewhere where He wants you to be.
mm.
So it's
Now,
going from knowing His mercy to actually embracing His mercy. It's two different worlds.
you mentioned a moment ago the app Quran Trek, so Qurantrek, that people can look for
Sure.
in their app store.
Correct.
Um, what are the issues today? I mean,
Hmm.
we've come hopefully a little bit
Hmm.
improved from 9/11, and yet
Hmm.
then things keep taking turns back and forth. What does the Muslim community in the U.S. face today, and then how can those of us in the majority help alleviate those?
So that I'll just summarize 22 years of my service to give credibility for where to answer your question.
Okay.
2003, I was invited by the White House, President Bush, to become a part of the White House faith-based community initiatives. I worked with Governor Bush in 2004 for Hurricane Charlie response team. I was part of the Florida Department of Education, advisor to the Florida Department of Education as a sole Muslim advisor for over 12 years. I was able to participate in Bernie Sanders' campaign, Hillary Clinton's campaign. I got to meet with Bill Clinton, and I'm also currently serving as a member of the White House and Community Outreach Team under President Biden. I also gave the inaugural prayer for Biden in his inaugural prayer ceremony. Um, this was the path that was laid out for me when it came to civic engagement. When it
Mm.
came to interfaith, it went from visiting local churches and synagogues to lecturing to giving Shabbat services to speaking at the Flag, which is the headquarters of Scientology in Clearwater. These were the paths where I felt this was also a separate path that I felt that was paid for me from God to represent Islam. Now, what makes these two the same is in the midst of terror, in the midst of wars, in the midst of Islamophobia and Islamic extremism, I had an opportunity as a scholar, as someone born in the West, educated in the West, to not just meet with people from various faiths and government levels, but to also exemplify and represent my faith for what it was. And I felt that was very important because, in the absence of me representing my faith is still hijacked and held hostage by people who feel they know what my faith is all about. Besides, Islamophobia is a $1.5 billion industry in America today. It's an industry because it spews hate and misconceptions about what Islam is. So in 2015, after serving as an imam for 8 years at that mosque, I left. I'm like, I can no longer serve in four walls. I need to get out there. I started traveling the country, giving lectures on Sharia law, what it's about. I had already met with a Jewish fellow named Bob Gary when I was presenting on Islam at a church in Longboat Key. He came from his synagogue next door and he posed a very strong question, which many people in the audience were offended by, but I was not.
Mm.
And that led to us getting to know each other, holding debates on the Quran, not debates, but clarification. For this man, as a Jew, had learned about Islam from 1995, traveled the world to understand what Islam was, going to Muslim countries, meeting with Muslim imams and everyone else to figure out what Islam was. And now he and I are now standing on podiums in USF, Florida, in front of 700 people talking about what the Quran is about. Today, we have finished writing a book, which is about to be published. It's called I Am the Other, where we discuss Sharia law and we discuss the importance of understanding Islam for what it is. He's not he's not in favor of Islam. He's not a fan of Islam, but he brings the opposite perspective on what Islam is seen as, especially here in the West. Now that is where we're working on and what I'm working on, only because in light of what we're seeing in France, the
Yes.
hatred against Islam, that hijab was banned for French athletes. Where in England right now, riots are out happening, businesses are being burned, mosques are being threatened. This hatred is targeting Muslims across the West. And I feel it's now my calling and my path to ensure that I'm able to bring forth an understanding of what Islam is, not a watered down version and not a hardcore mindset version. It is something which is moderate, what Islam is about as an educated person, with someone who is a great attorney, senior to me, who has got a great resume, who is now pouncing back and putting me and basically my faith on trial. And so Muslims need to today understand their faith for what it is and not allow others to explain it for what it's not. And they need to become those representatives of the Quran, like living the Quran, so other people cannot put them down and say, well, that's not what Islam is about. So we have great challenges before us, and they're only amplifying with time as hatred, as religion and race is being used as a means of either putting one party, one side up and putting another side down. This is a challenge I fear will exacerbate in the coming months.
So it sounds like it would be helpful, for instance, for me, for someone
Mhm,
in the Christian majority,
mhm,
that before I believe what I hear other people saying, and sometimes by their attitude, you can tell they have an axe to grind and you don't want to trust them anyway. But
mhm.
I shouldn't make those judgments without knowing some Muslims and interacting and going to the mosque or the masjid and
Mhm.
having someone over to my home and working out how do we feed each other that works with our dietary. It seems like if I get to know someone, that's the biggest antidote to the violence or hatred.
100%. And we're living in a very antisocial environment today where loneliness is plaguing the world, where
Mm,
people feel disconnected and secluded. It's easy then to brainwash someone. Any rhetoric that's posted out there, be it on social media or on mainstream news channels, it's easily absorbed by people who don't have the ability to interact with someone or who are not inclined to interact with someone. And that's why the otherism continues.
yeah.
Maybe black versus white, Jew versus Muslim, or whatever the case may be, that's constantly amplifying. And so getting to know someone for who they are and not what someone told you that they are is essential for all of us. If we want to be in peace, like the question may be posed, what's in it for me? Like if I'm going to go learn about you, what's in it for me? Well, for me, it would be the peace knowing that you're not the person I thought you were. And that
Mm,
worry burdened me and bogged me down, and it took away my peace of the day, and it made me have sleepless nights. Now I want to know about you for my peace, not for your peace. And then when you find the humanity factor, that we're the same, we aspire to, have to get married, to raise our children, to make sure they have a great life, and that we succeed in our economic endeavors here in America, the land of opportunities. It's kind of the same. Then it's easy to say, hey, let me question that rhetoric. And then when you understand Islam for what it is, you know what it's not, then you could totally push that rhetoric aside. So in the midst of the othering and the two forces of Islamophobia and extremism, we're working towards the human aspect of bringing people together and getting to know the other, and also to get to know about the other's faith and belief for what it is. So
yeah.
it's a huge undertaking, but you're right. We need to get out there and just talk.
Well, and it eliminates fear,
It does. 100%.
which is just we don't make good judgments
Mhm.
when we're operating out of ignorance and fear.
um, we try to understand religion from the actions of people, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
in a world of 2 billion Muslims, 25% of the global population today, um, when a person says, "Do you know a Muslim?" No, I know about a Muslim. I know there's a Abu Bakr Baghdadi, there's a Ismail Haniya, there's a Osama bin Laden. But you don't know them. You know about them, and you know about them from the angle of whoever told you to know them, and that's fine. I'm not here to give credit or to take away credit. I'm not here to. But Islam isn't a person. Islam is
Yeah.
a religion. And when we're able to separate the two, then it's easy to say these are criminals rather than the Islamic faith and Muslims around the world are out to do X, Y, and Z. So,
Yeah.
most of the slaves that came to America were Muslims. Yes, I don't know if Muslims sold them. That's a whole different story. But like Muslims were the ones who came as slaves. A lot of them to America, Haiti, Jamaica, wherever else. A
Mm,
lot of them lost their ancestry and lost their religion, but a lot of them kept it also. So it's
mm.
yeah.
You have you mentioned that you live by the words, quote, "We are doing all this for the next generation."
Mhm.
What are you hoping to see in the next generation and the one after that from as fruit of the work that you're doing now?
So our job as humans, as Muslims, we're taught that our job as humans are custodians of this earth. We're supposed to be the caretakers. We're supposed to make sure we take care of the environment, we take care of the water, the trees, the plants, the insects, the animals. We're
Hmm.
supposed to take care of it. And we're supposed to hand it over better to the next generation so they can do a better job than we did. In light of the world that we're living in, where environmentally, economically, socially, every aspect, politically, we're going the opposite spectrum, it's our duty and responsibility to start planting seeds of change, seeds that display different plants, different colors, different atmosphere, provide a different vibe. And then the generation that comes after us, our children, and then their children, will be able to see a distinction between two different mindsets and ethics and ways rather than one being streamlined. And that's when they'll be able to follow the inclination of their heart, where they can choose love over hatred, where they can choose right over wrong, where they can choose inclusivity over, division. That's where they're going to make, and that's where they're going to solve the problems of our waterways, stop these plastic bottles, stop polluting the air. All these things can be possible when a person knows what the alternative is. And in a world where alternatives are constantly being wiped away or thrown aside, people feel, well, this is the world and this is life, and don't feel any expectations of change and don't even think of change. Just live things out. Where are we going with that? So we're doing this so that the next generation takes that step forward. Hopefully in their generation, our seeds will grow into plants, and hopefully in their children's generation, they'll be able to harvest the fruits. And then from those fruits, they'll take the seeds to plant more plants that will constantly, create a domino effect.
You're saying things on this huge global scale,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is obviously the viewpoint of God that we should all aspire to. And yet we each have just the world within us where we
Mm-hmm.
choose our actions and how those will affect the larger world. I really admire, for instance, the pillars of Islam and alms and the giving for the care of the poor and the prayers multiple times a day to turn our hearts to God just on a personal level. What brings you the most joy about your faith?
What brings me the most joy in today's world, in these times, in this time of my life, is knowing that when I'm feeling unease, discomfort, I have someone to turn to, and that's my Lord. He's there.
Hmm.
It's not like I have to go search for him. I need to make amends with him on issues of me ignoring him or something. He's there. And that relationship not only grows, but then that relationship inspires you. You know, being, I've been through a lot in life personally, but also in society, having opportunities, for example, to be part of the Orlando shooting response team, being there at a time when a Muslim perpetrated this crime, allegedly, like he took allegiance with, he pledged allegiance to ISIS, and he did
Hmm.
all this massacre. And what would make me walk into the fire? Like, why would I walk there? It was just meant to be that I was in Orlando, that I was by the site, that my friend got the phone call that the clergy team is being formed and they need me down by the ORMC hospital. And there I was right there. So the point is that when God and you become close, then he uses you as a tool for goodness. And some of the most greatest experiences I've had to reaffirm my faith and to reassure myself that my God is with me, my Lord is with me, were in times of difficulties and distress,
Right.
especially during the Orlando shooting response team, when I was able to comfort a grandmother who was flanked by two priests and she was constantly passing out, and she saw me, she called me, and we hugged each other and cried, is because faith motivates us to be better versions of ourselves, which then emit a vibe that's positivity that others can feed off of as you feed off their positivity. So we're humans. We have within us a capacity to do great things. Why do we shorten or narrow our abilities? Why do we shortlist ourselves? Okay, I can only do X, Y, and Z. There's A to Z. There's so much more you can do. And so I find comfort in knowing my Lord is there when I need him. He's there to inspire me and push me forward when the time calls for it. And I find solace in times of distress and difficulty in just remembering his name. So the five pillars of Islam are pillars that you establish life on. They're not the house, they're not the tent, they're the foundational pillars. On top of it, you build your life, your morals, your characters, your values. But praying, faith, prayer, giving charity, fasting in Ramadan, and performing the pilgrimage are 5 pillars, like a tent. You have 4 corners and you have one in the middle. These are the 5 pillars that will keep the tent up and erect. Now, from there, if you want to beautify your tent, you want to make it like a home, you want to make it stronger, fortify it, so long those 5 sticks holding up the tent are strong, you could do anything.
Mm. You mentioned the pilgrimage or the Hajj, and
Mhm.
you've been able to make that.
Uh, with the blessings of God, almost every year. I just came
Mm.
back in end of June or July, and yeah, it's an amazing experience. I got to go after 5 years this time because 19 was the last time. Then the pandemic, 2021, 22, 23 is where things started getting better, but the system had changed for Americans and Europeans and Westerners to go. So it was an online lottery system. And this year I was serving. So I go as a scholar to serve the pilgrims, to help guide them through the pilgrimage and the obligations and how to fulfill everything so that spiritually they feel that they've completed their pilgrimage. And alongside,
Can
I
you re-
perform my own pilgrimage.
can you remember what you felt the first time to be there in the place where those events of Scripture
Well,
are
it's
where
it's
that happened?
it's hard to because every time you go there, it's a different, unique feeling. It's so
Mm.
different, it can't be explained. However, yes, you're in awe because you see these pictures of Mecca and the Holy Mosque, the Grand Mosque, and but once you're there and you're in front of it, it doesn't look anything like the pictures. You can have a perception of the size of it, but it's not so big and it's not so small, and um, the feeling is very different. It's a feeling of peace. It's a feeling of serenity. It's a feeling of closeness that helps you strengthen your resolve. And okay, I'm by God's house. I'm gonna hold on to His door. I'm gonna knock that door. I'm gonna call on to Him and pray to Him. It just boosts your faith. It boosts your morale. And then again, around people, thousands, millions at times. I've been to pilgrimage when there's over 4 million people.
Wow.
Official numbers might be around 3 something, but then they opened the doors for the rest of the people from the kingdom who wanted to come in. So you got another million plus people there. But it's beautiful. People of all walks of life, with all different languages, different race and cultures coming together to do the same thing and helping one another along the way. It's a beautiful experience. It can't be explained by words. I think that's the
That
best way to say it.
that makes sense. That
Yeah.
makes sense. It seems like it could be overwhelming and
Mhm,
beautiful.
mhm,
Um, People can look up the Quran Trek app. Also,
mhm.
you are on Instagram
Yeah.
uh, by I Azhar.
Mhm.
So the letter I, Azhar, and you post frequently
Yeah.
and very interesting material that you've put there. Maybe
Sure.
just as a final question, I'm wondering, do you
Mhm.
still have a moment?
I do. Yes.
Good. With the chance to serve on White House committees, looking towards interfaith engagement or whatever might need to be done, are you hopeful about those? I sometimes could see like it's a bunch of people meeting, but will anything come out of it? Have you been able to see positive forward movement because of those types of committees and interfaith thought and conversation?
So, you know, in Islam, we're taught that the job of the Messenger and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and rather all the prophets, peace be upon them, was to present the message and to convey it both verbally and by example, right?
Hmm.
And they did that. Maybe Moses, and to us, Jesus, peace be upon him, and Muhammad, peace be upon him. All they did was present the message. Migrating to Medina for the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was vital because he could speak in Mecca, limited, but he couldn't practice openly. He
Mm.
couldn't show that burying your daughters alive isn't life. Like, he had to show an alternative. So you had to build an atmosphere and an environment. but it comes from example first, displaying it. Talk is cheap. So that's why he migrated to Medina, where the Jews had invited him and the two pagan tribes and said, hey, come here, live here with us, practice your faith, but at the same time, if you can't govern our society, because society was messed up at that time. So he created a model of how an interfaith society can respectfully live together. It's the first of its kind, where the Jews, the Muslims, and the non-believers were living side by side. And the laws that were drafted reflected that every person will practice their faith and everyone will not be put down because of their faith or feel threatened. And if our city is attacked, we're all going to defend it together. And if there's a call in need, we're all going to help together. So it was a framework. So on the premise of that, I feel interfaith and civic engagement both are greatly meaningful if you're able to answer the questions, to resolve the misunderstandings, and you're able to present what your faith is. And they could say, hey, you know what? A Muslim, we talked to him the other day, he's not like what we just heard happen in France, for example. And nothing's happened in France, but just for example, they would see something on the news today and they'll be like, hey, but yeah, that guy might be a Muslim, but Muslims are not like that. What I've learned from civic engagement and engaging with politicians, the mayors, city council members, senators, representatives, or the president, is that your presence matters. And being in contact is always a good thing, especially for the Muslims, because we're constantly bombarded with negativity. When it comes to interfaith, my first exposure to the Global Interfaith Forum was the Parliament of the World's Religions in Toronto in 2018. That's where I was invited. One of the professors I used to lecture at her class, I was a volunteer spiritual director for the University of Tampa. So I'd visit there and, I would be talking, and she had proposed that I, alongside 3 others, go and do a panel discussion in the parliament. And that was really intriguing. But what I felt from the parliament, both in 2018 and the one in Chicago last year, was people come together for various reasons. Some may just come together and say, hey, let's just celebrate your faith as you celebrate my faith. Some will come together and say, I'm going to preach to you and you better listen to me because inside I feel you're wrong and I'm right. Some will come to enlighten others while learning from others. So for me, in 2023, the parliament was about telling the people and teaching the people what is Sharia compared to what the world has heard. And that's kind of become my mission. And that's why the book, I Am the Other, is coming out, because we want people to know about Islam for what it is and not what people are making it to be. And that was well received. But for me, when I go there, I believe interfaith for Muslims at this time, it's such a sensitive time for us where we don't have much time in our hands. I'm not interested in kumbaya and we all love each other, but internally we hate each other, we resent each other. I want us to have real talk, to be part of real conversations, to answer real questions that people may have. And we can agree to disagree, but I could walk away saying to myself, I had the ability to answer this person's question. They like it or not, they agree or not, they accept it or not, it's not my business, but I did it. And hopefully one day that answer will question them when they're taking on someone's narrative and say, well, but you heard that also, or you were shown that also. And so again, a more strategic approach to interfaith would make interfaith more meaningful. And I'll end with this one point, and I'm sorry I'm taking long here, but I think this is important. In a world that is plummeting into abyss due to hatred that's leading to bloodshed, that's leading to people targeting others for reasons that they don't even know, where our society is facing levels of unrest and so many problems, what responsibility do we as faith leaders have in this world? And that was a question I posed to a priest and a rabbi last Sunday in Florida when we had our interfaith live panel. And I said, we play a role also. I think it's about time we stand up and fulfill our part. And that is to learn from each other, to educate each other, to bring our congregations together so that they see the humanity of the other, and thereby we mold our society into a better society. Because if we don't do that, and we constantly preach to our choir, we are contributing towards the fall of this world. That's my belief.
We have been very lucky here in the northern Utah area to have several imams who really spend so much time being on panels, answering questions, and really taking
Amazing.
the philosophy, Imam Shoabdin and several others here in the area. They are a blessing to our whole community as well as the
Amen.
mosques that they serve. And bless you for the good work that you do, Imam Azhar Subedar,
Thank you.
around the world besides just where you are locally in Texas. And it's a privilege to speak with you today in good faith.
Likewise.